Dude, I think it has massage. That's awesome. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Are you ready for the big finale? I'm Christian Brady, Dean of the Schreier Honors College and a very proud affiliate member of the College of IST. Before we get started, I think we have some housekeeping tips to go over. Nick, if you would.
Thank you. Good afternoon. If you could please turn off or silence your cell phones for the duration of the talk. And also we'll be taking questions several different ways. You can tweet you can text poll everywhere. So you'll be texting IST startup, a space, and then your question to 22333. So that's to 22333. Text IST startup, a space, and your question. We'll also be taking questions through Twitter with the hashtag IST startup, and you can do the old-fashioned way by raising your hand as well. Students are also welcome to take photos throughout the duration of the presentation, and we'd like you to share that on our Flickr stream and Twitter as well with the same IST startup hashtag. Thank you.
Thank you. I have often said to many of our students and our supporters around that I think honors education ought to be the place for innovation, to be an incubator for new ideas. And it's great and gratifying to see IST Startup Week so strong and to see so many of our distinguished alumni coming back who have been so successful as entrepreneurs. So thank you all for being here, especially to our alumni and guests and to the Penn State community. Well, this is it. This is our finale of Startup Week 2015. This afternoon, of course, we have a very special and exciting guest speaker. But before I introduce him, I want to first welcome a new member to the Penn State community, my newest colleague, Dr. Andrew Sears. Dr. Sears is currently Dean of the B. Thomas Golisano College of Computing and Information Sciences at RIT, the Rochester Institute of Technology. He has served in that capacity since 2011. He'll begin his appointment here at Penn State on July 11th. During his tenure at RIT, Dr. Sears founded the first academic department in the United States dedicated exclusively to computing security. Dr. Sears' research centers on human-centered computing and accessibility, with projects focused on issues associated with mobile computing, health information technologies, speech recognition, and assessing an individual's cognitive status via normal daily interactions with information technologies. And today, Andrew will be interviewing Drew. Drew Houston is CEO and co-founder of Dropbox, something that has brought joy to all our lives. Certainly made it easier. He's led Dropbox growth from a simple idea to a service used by millions around the world. Before founding Dropbox, Drew received his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and computer science from MIT in 2006. After graduating, Drew was endlessly frustrated by carrying USB drives and emailing himself files. Probably emailing files to himself. Probably not emailing himself to files. Just clarify that. In early 2007, he teamed up with fellow MIT student Arash Ferdowski, and the two began working on the project that would eventually become Dropbox. He's been named one of Fortune's 40 under 40, and in early 2014, Drew and Arash were named TechCrunch's Founders of the Year. Please welcome Dr. Sears and Drew Houston. Thank you. Do you get that or your mic?
Okay, hopefully this thing is on.
It's like a massage chair here.
Yeah, I
Like there's all these buttons on it.
This is the nicest chair I've been in a while. I'm thrilled to be here today, and welcome to Penn State.
Thank you.
It's an exciting event. Great to see a big crowd here. So I've heard, well, I know you're an MIT grad, but I've heard that your sister is a Penn State grad.
Yes. So she, my little sister went to graduate in 2011 from here. She was studied chemical engineering and is now a chemical engineer. Actually, I've got a lot of ties to Penn State. My grandmother went here. One of my best friends from high school went here. A lot of these guys are some of my best friends in San Francisco. So yeah, and I've visited a couple times when my sister was in school. Got to see a football game, and saw her graduation. So it's good to be back.
Well, so I'm curious, since I'm about to arrive here and I know just a little bit about Penn State. So what have you learned about Penn State? And I hear Penn Staters is the official term, and the Penn State community that you can help educate me some for my arrival.
Well, I think first just try saying we are.
We are. We are.
You gotta say it loudly.
We are.
Oh, there
Wow,
we go.
that works. Okay. No, I've got the first.
It's a fun place. It's a great place. There's a ton of energy. I got to learn what college sports is actually like because MIT has a really good math team, but not a good football team. So no, it's a lot of fun being here.
I can relate somewhat. The best athletic team for any university I've been at so far was actually a chess team, so for which they gave scholarships.
Yeah, we apparently have a good rifle team, which I don't know is either a good thing or a bad thing. 'Cause MIT students also get really stressed out and frustrated at school. So.
Well, I am looking forward to it. This will be the first university I've worked at that actually has a football team, which is kind of odd. So really the focus today is on your experience with Dropbox and as an entrepreneur. And I know you were involved with several startups, including Accolade, and then eventually, and then arguably more significantly, Dropbox. And I'm curious if you can, were there things that felt different about Dropbox when you got started that gave you a feeling this was going to turn out?
Yeah,
Right
so before Dropbox, I had started a company maybe a few years prior, and even then I've been programming since I was a little kid, and one of my first job, well, I guess my first job was babysitting, but my second job was like I was working programming on a computer game, which is another story. But throughout high school and college, I had internships at different small companies or different startups, and so that was like the best thing I can think of, or best preparation I can think of for starting a company without actually doing it. With Dropbox, it was, there was something, it was different from my first company in that it was a problem that I could get really excited about and become obsessed with for a long time. And my first company was an SAT prep company. So yeah, I guess you can get pretty excited about that for a while, I guess. But it wasn't quite, it wasn't the kind of thing that everyone would one day be using. Hopefully, if you take the SAT, you don't take it more than once. But what was different about it is it had the sort of the combination of a really deep technical challenge, because I mean, at heart I'm an engineer, and that's sort of my first, like some of the other speakers, my first love really. And so there's an endless array of interesting technical problems, and it was something that we wouldn't have known it at the time, but it was about to become an important problem, a problem that a lot of people were going to have. And so it was exciting because even in the earliest moments of starting the company, there was a big problem, big frustration that I had with carrying a thumb drive around and things like that. And even when I put together a video and put it online, sort of doing a demo of a prototype of Dropbox, and even in the early days, people got excited about it. I mean, a lot of people thought it was a bad idea, which I can talk about. But there was always momentum from the beginning, and it was something that was easy for me to get excited about because I just really was frustrated by having this problem myself. So I'm like, okay, even if I have one customer, I'd be happy.
Interesting. So that makes me think of a couple of things. One, it reminds me of some conversations I've had with other entrepreneurs where they talk about the importance not only of having the good idea, but having the good idea at the right time. And it sounds like you really hit a home run with Dropbox on that front.
So, I think I was a little ahead of the curve in that, or maybe just sort of had a kind of a niche problem, which was I had to work across a bunch of different computers. In a world where most people just had a laptop. But most people were not encountering this challenge of like, how do I move stuff between a Windows computer and a Linux server and another, laptop over here. That was pretty rare, but that was a problem that I had. this was 2007, so maybe 2006 when I really, late 2006. This was just before the iPhone was launched or announced. And the smartphone was really the dawn of a new era where everybody suddenly has two computers, right? And everybody has a computer in their pocket, and they've got, they have their other laptop. And so having your stuff in the cloud became, the benefits of that suddenly were really magnified. So the timing, even though the idea that your stuff should live in the cloud or should follow you around had been around since really my parents were kids, it only became something that became a real pain point for people. It was just about to become a pain point right as we were incorporating the company.
Yeah, clearly the timing was right on. I'm curious. So you mentioned the idea of programming and being involved in various companies, and I mean, I'm assuming you have a bunch of first and second year students out here, certainly a lot of students, and some of them are probably sitting there thinking, I'd like to do what he did. And what kind of experiences, what kind of experiences would you suggest they focus on while a student to help them get ready for kind of heading off and doing their own startup?
Well, I think there are a lot of valuable things that I learned in my years at college, and first and foremost, I mean, I had been programming since I was a kid, but really studying computer science formally and becoming a good engineer was really valuable because it sort of brings you to a whole new level of craft and lets you solve problems that you couldn't solve before, and it's also not just about being a better programmer, but it teaches you ways of thinking that are applicable to all kinds of situations. And so I think the academic part of it was really important for me. The second thing was, was around a lot of the people that I met at school, because I met my co-founder at MIT. Probably the majority of our first dozen employees we didn't really know a lot of people. We knew our friends in school, and so bringing them over from MIT, having that pool of people and knowing what good looks like was really valuable. And then the third thing was maybe a little unexpected, but so I pledged a fraternity in college. And you think fraternity, you watch Animal House, you don't really think of that as like the college fraternity is like a bastion of higher learning, right? But I feel like I learned, I learned, in some ways as much through that experience as I did in class. And I didn't even really realize it at the time, but so, especially if you start out purely technical, which like I did, a lot of what the hard part about building the company is really around people, right? Like trying to get a bunch of people to do anything is not easy. And so what I did in college, in my fraternity, first of all, you're sort of thrown in the deep end with a bunch of other kind of random people, and from all these different backgrounds, and you have to figure out how to get along, and you sort of learn. If you're paying attention, you can learn a lot about what makes people tick, and sort of effective ways of dealing with people in conflict, and ineffective ways, and and if you're sort of paying attention, even something like someone like took my clothes out of the washing machine, didn't put them in the dryer. God damn it, they did it again. Writing my first way of solving this was like, okay, I'm going to write a really long and bitchy email to the entire fraternity, and you quickly learn that that's not a good idea. So it's sort of in retrospect you see some of these lessons of how to help people, and then and I can talk more about it, but then really I started learning faster when I took on I was social chair a couple times and rush chair a couple times, and this problem is on your shoulders of like, how do you find like a really awesome pledge class, which turns out to be just like the challenge of like, how do you build a really awesome team for your company, or like being social chair, like how you design an awesome poster so that you can compete against the other fraternities that are throwing parties. How do you learn? You have to learn Photoshop. You have to like figure out what works and doesn't. That's actually not that different from like, how do we get people to use Dropbox instead of Google Drive or OneDrive. And so I wouldn't have predicted that, but it turned out to be just whether it's a fraternity or any other student organization, there are sort of a lot of unexpected parallels between those and running a business, which are now obvious, but I never would have imagined.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson, and the challenges of working with people and organizing people and getting them to get things done. I can relate to your desire to write those emails to people. My own personal approach is I write the email, I do the reply, I start crafting the email, but before I do, I make sure I delete the recipient. So when I accidentally hit send, it only goes to me. And then you let that sit for at least a day, and after you let it sit for a day, then you can think about whether or not you should be sending a very different version of it to the person. I think that's some great advice for the people who are thinking about starting a company. There's a whole other group, and it's been an interesting conversation with students who are interested in getting involved in a startup. They don't necessarily want to start it, but they want to be like employee number 5 or very early on. And there seems to be a whole different set of challenges that they need to face, and certainly at least one of the ones that I run into all the time is even how to find a startup that might be a match. I mean, yeah, everybody knows Apple, Google, whoever, but startups, the names aren't necessarily flowing as quickly.
So I think, well, first of all, I mean, the good news is there is an insatiable demand for engineering talent among startups. You will never find a startup that's not looking for a great engineer, particularly in the Bay Area, but really all over the world. And so I think, you know, it is very hard to sift through all of them. There are a lot of companies that are started every year. Some do really well, some don't. Wouldn't it be great if there were people out there that picked the good ones, and those people are called investors? And so if you go to some of the really great venture capital firms, and I can give you a couple examples, but I wouldn't fret about trying to memorize them. But you know, our investors, Sequoia Capital is a really great firm. You know, there's others, Andreessen Horowitz, or in Silicon Valley. Just Google list of best venture capital firms, and join. And the reason you wanted that filter is really valuable. And Y Combinator is another great filter that you'll get even earlier stage stuff. That's really a good way to pick, because you know, you have these professional investors whose job, everything the thing they think about is, how do I join a good company, or how do I find good companies and invest in them first? And so if you're looking to join a company, I think first of all, there's a lot of sites that will connect you to startups. I think even Y Combinator does some of these things formally. But that would be my approach.
So that's a good way of finding them. Any advice or suggestions about what's going to make somebody a good fit for these companies, or the types of experiences that they should be looking to have?
Yeah, so I think just internships are the most valuable thing. Whether you just are curious about startups or want to start a company someday, getting an internship at one of these companies is usually a great start. And you know, I think getting an internship at a startup is probably not the same things you would do to get a good job at any company, or they're the same things you would do whether you're applying to a startup or applying to a big company. You can be it might help to be a little scrappier with a startup. I think if you just email, well, you know, I don't know. There's a bunch of tactics you could use to try to get on their radar, but and I imagine there are probably startup fairs and things like that here, but they'll bias towards larger companies.
Yeah, that's been my experience. Certainly, the startups are often not in a position to send people off to lots of
Microsoft will have like a giant booth the size of the stage, and a startup will have a folding table. That was our experience. Like, we did that in the beginning.
Yeah. So a couple of times you've mentioned things that made me think about your MIT commencement speech, which I watched just the other day. I have to say, does it always rain?
It was not like a happy, fun day. It was raining.
If you haven't seen it, you should look it up. Everybody's sitting there with ponchos and getting drenched, and I couldn't help but to feel sorry for your grandmother when they zoomed in, and she looked just.
Well, it was a little unfair because all of us were covered, and everybody else it was like thousands of people out just getting.
I don't know. Do they do Penn State graduations outside here? That's good. I was part of one that was outside. It wasn't raining, but it was 95 degrees and sunny, and everybody in their black regalia was sweating and passing out, so it wasn't real fun. But in the commencement speech, you mentioned a couple of things. I'll just give the highlights: the tennis balls, circle of friends or influence, and 30,000 days. And I think that at least some of the people out here have heard of these things or watched it, but could you give people an overview, a summary?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I gave the commencement speech at MIT, and really what I was thinking about is, like, I've been on this crazy adventure, and like, but if you were to roll the dice, if I were to go back to being like 22 and you were to roll the dice again, it's like very unlikely that this would have all happened the way it has. And so I'm like, what do I wish like if I could like send a little, note back to myself, with like the most important things, like what would they be? And some of the stuff we've covered, but one is the tennis balls. It says I was like, okay, this note would have three things on it. It would have a tennis ball, have a circle, and it would have the number 30,000. I think is what the three things were. And the tennis ball is really about. Probably a bunch of you had dogs growing up. Have you ever seen like the look on a dog's face when you throw a tennis ball? Or when they're running with a tennis ball, like their tongues, they just look ridiculous. And they're just like totally singularly focused. And when I thought about the people that were like my friends that were like the most successful and happy, and they just seemed to have all the combination of the things that a lot of us want to have, they kind of had that single-minded obsession, with a problem that was really important to them. And I, like some of the other speakers here, I kind of meandered through different things. I had different internships. I started my first company. I had the same experience as Justin, where after a while I'm just like, I'm getting up in the morning and I don't want to go to work. And I'm like, because what do I have to do today at work? All right, it's an SAT prep company. I got to write some questions about parallel lines. I got to write another version of the train leaving Memphis at 1:15 p.m. and the train leaving whatever at 4:32. And so if any of you have questions about the stuff, I can tell you all about it. But I'm like, God, okay. And I kept, what I found was I kept getting distracted by these side projects, and I would feel guilty. So the first one was, and I'll summarize the other 2 points. I'm not going to sort of hash the whole thing here, but just with these side projects that were just sort of like drawing me in, and like I made a poker bot. So I don't know if any of you have played online poker. So this is something that tries to do that for you, so you can in theory be sleeping and making money, and in practice you're sleeping and it's like crashing and losing all your money. But I just like I'd gone from like I felt like I was like something was wrong with me because I wasn't working hard on my SAT prep company, but then over here on this poker bot I was like just totally insane and obsessed and like not sleeping, and then Dropbox kind of that allowed me to distinguish between that feeling of something I really love doing versus not, and then that when you asked about what's different about Dropbox versus the other thing, I had that like wellspring of like, oh my God, I'm like super interested in this problem from like every dimension, the technical aspects, the business aspects. Like it's something that theoretically everybody in the planet could be using, and that like got me really, that's what you need, that kind of motivation if you're going to do something. I've been running the company for about probably more than 8 years. That's like going to college and then going to college again, right? And like super intense. And that's really what has motivated me. And second is the circles really, they say, there's a quote out there that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So you think about that, you're like, okay, well, it's probably pretty important who those 5 people are. And MIT was a place where I found my co-founder, found some of my best friends, and like my fraternity. I learned a ton from there. And also moving to San Francisco was a really great way to surround myself with people who really knew about building companies, and surrounding myself with entrepreneurs who were really at the top of their game, the way you might, if you want to be really good at football, like try to, you want to be in the NFL, you want to be on a Super Bowl kind of team. And the third was 30,000. So I had just moved to San Francisco, and it was like late one night, and I'm just on my laptop, like kind of screwing around, and I'm reading this article or something, and it says, you will live for 30,000 days. And I'm like, this is clinically obvious. Like, okay, clearly, it's like 81 years, or I don't know how many years it is, but something like that. And then I don't know what compelled me to do it, but I tab over into my calculator, and I type it. I'm like, okay, I'm 24 times 365. I'm like, holy shit. I'm like 8,000 days down. I'm not like I'm not like 1,000. I'm like almost a third of the way done here. So like, you know, because you go through life and you're like, I gotta get ready for this, and I gotta get these test scores so I can get in this college and like do this, and then before I can start a company, I gotta work at a big company, then medium company, then a little company, and then get my, you know, and along the way I should get my, you know, master's degree and my PhD, and so then I'll be like qualified to start a company. You know, that's where like intuition can kind of lead you, and I'm like, oh my God, I just gotta get going. And so, you know, that. And you also put a lot of pressure on yourself to like be like really good, like be perfect at everything, and so you know that just seeing that 30,000 day thing like really changed a lot of how I think about life, and you know, instead of always trying to like get ready for stuff and like be perfect, you know, just kind of make it a good story, right?
Yeah.
So so those are some of the themes. You know, that's what I wish I had told myself at like, you know, 22 or 24.
Well, we got plenty of additional questions about the return to the tennis balls later, but since they opened it up for people to send in questions, I would feel really bad if we don't get to some of them. So whoever is gathering questions or has them, if they can pass them along, that would be good. But in the meantime, I'm curious. I know for me personally, as I looked back and I was doing this as I was thinking about coming here to Penn State, and I realized that at no point along the path did I actually have any clue what the next step was going to be. When I went to college, I never thought I'd become a professor. I never envisioned I'd become a department chair or a dean. I just kind of discovered it. So did you have this feeling that you wanted to be involved with startups early on, or what was your sense?
Yeah, so for me it started, I played, you know, my parents had a computer when I bought a computer when I was really little, and I loved playing computer games, and I wanted to make my own computer games. So in a sense, I knew that I wanted to start something, because I'm like, you know, and I thought, until probably high school, or probably through high school until college, I thought all I wanted to ever do was just like make a company that could make like awesome games. So in that sense, and then I really admired a lot of the, you know, probably the first entrepreneur I really learned about was like Bill Gates, and the story of how like they made computers, or how they made computers work with the operating system and Microsoft. So yeah, the sort of the seed was planted very early, even though I had no idea what starting a company actually was. And then I was kind of fortunate to have that experience where I started working on computer games and working on different small companies, which sort of gave me a glimpse of what that could be like and how exciting that was when you have just like a small group of people that's like trying to do something really big against the odds, and you know, everybody's working really closely together and really cares about everything they're doing, and they find that work really fulfilling. And so that I was sort of captivated by that even in, you know, junior high school.
Yeah. I was thinking about asking a question, and I don't think it's going to work as well anymore, but at one point people used to always talk about what was the first computer you had, and somehow I don't think the answer is going to be anything like what I've heard before.
No, I had a PC Junior, which was kind of the redheaded stepchild of the PC the IBM PC family. So it used to be IBM made the computers, but now not anymore. But it was great. It was kind of, when I was a little kid, I was like this glowing screen and all these buttons, and I would just like, even before I could read, I would like be mashing the keys. Then I started learning to program in BASIC, and that kind of got me on a path to learning a lot more. And you know, when you're a kid, you have a lot of time on your hands, so I could sort of like screw around. I was able to get a pretty early start with programming.
Great. So having talked with a bunch of people who started their own companies, it's pretty clear that they've made some sacrifices, and they've kind of approached life in a little bit of a way that differs from somebody who might go off and join a big established company. I'm curious if you could share a little bit about your thoughts in terms of the sacrifices that you've had to make, the things that you've had to do differently, to give some of our students an idea as to what they might be in for, what they might be prepared for if they want to go down this path.
Yeah, so I think, you know, there's a couple different ways of looking at it. And I think, you know, with talks like this, it's sort of, you usually just cover the high notes and like the fun parts, and it just seems awesome. And there are a lot of really awesome parts about it, but, you know, every moment in between is just like a lot of work.
Yeah.
And a lot of things that are sort of not that, you know, to this day, there's sort of an endless barrage of things. Like, oh, someone wants to quit, or a competitor is like doing this to us, or like, someone didn't accept their offer, or sort of the company building kind of happens one brick at a time. And so being able to work really hard is an advantage. There's like no way around that. That was one of the good things from college, is really having like there are a lot of easier degrees in computer science, but tackling that head on and learning to work hard early is a big advantage for whatever else you do afterwards. And I think the others are not really sacrifices as much as, one thing that is clear to me now that is sort of obvious, but you don't really think about it when you're just starting, is that like nobody's born like a founder. Like nobody's born knowing how to start a company. Like for anyone who's like a founder or a CEO or president of the United States, like any profession, at some point that person was doing it for the first time, and by definition didn't know what they were doing. So Bill Gates didn't know what he was doing when he, didn't know what he was doing when he started Microsoft, right? And I think that should give everybody some comfort that, like, yeah, like a lot of stuff you just got to kind of figure it out. But the hard part, I think everybody understands that in theory, but then the hard part of that is like it means it's uncomfortable, right? And if you're especially if you're technical, a lot of the stuff around people, a lot of the challenges around people, building a system of people are like totally foreign and totally uncomfortable, right? When I was just getting started, like the idea of like sitting in front of a group of 20 people, let alone a couple hundred, would have been terrifying, and so you kind of so I think that the thing, whether starting a company or anything else, is like when you get that feeling of like, oh my God, I'm not ready, instead of like running away from that, like run towards it. And it's sort of, if you have that attitude for over a week, it's not going to make a difference, but over many years, it makes a huge difference. And I think, and often people kind of trick themselves into thinking like, oh, I'm not X, or I'm not good at, public speaking, or I'm not good at, I can't be a startup founder. And the thing is, like, if you believe that, whether it's true or not, whether you're convincing yourself you can or can't, you're right. Right? So if you say like I can't do it, then yeah, you're not going to, because you're not going to start. But it's funny because for other things like learning a sport or learning an instrument, you're like, yeah, I'm not going to be Jimi Hendrix on the first day. But I think that the sacrifices or the hard parts are really about confronting a lot of those really hard things directly, and confronting your own weaknesses, which sounds great in theory, but like going to the gym, like if you're like smiling and happy after your workout and didn't exert yourself, it's like not a very good workout. So,
Dr. Sears, we have a few questions from the audience if you'd like to now
Sure.
take that opportunity. So these are a few questions that came in over the poll everywhere. Let's see. Clearly, you've had the technical skills, Drew, required to build a tech startup for a long time. However, did you always want to be a CEO? Did you expect that someday you would be a CEO? What do you believe helped you most in becoming a great CEO?
I mean, to be honest, I was scared. I was like, I knew I could do the technical part really well. This was when starting Dropbox, and I even started a company before. But I'm like, maybe I should get someone who really knows the business side of the house, because I don't. And I think it was always a part of me that wanted to give it a shot, but I didn't know I would. I didn't know what it would take to actually be successful. So, and then fortunately, I had I talked to the founder or actually I talked to the CEO of one of the companies that I was working for at the time, or the company I was working for at the time. And he's like, look, just give it a shot, go for it. I was an engineer and I learned the business stuff on the job too, and just see what happens. And so, seeing what happens just happened to stretch out another 8 years and beyond.
Yeah, I think the being willing to take that risk and getting out of the comfort zone of the technical piece you can master, and then figuring out people on the business side is a whole nother world.
Yeah, and I think you can start getting used to that feeling while you're in school, right? So by either starting an organization or like just find stuff where like you take on responsibility, and it's hard and it's kind of ambiguous, right? And there's like no one really telling you what to do or how to do it. So for me that was like one of the examples was being rush chair, right? You have like a week or two where you can recruit these freshmen, and you can kind of break down the problem. There's like 1,000 freshmen in the incoming class, 600 at MIT are guys, maybe 300 will pledge a fraternity, and you like break it down, and but you're like, oh God, if at the end of that we don't have like the most awesome class, and we don't have at least like 10 or whatever people, then oh shit, like everybody's dues are gonna go up, like that'll make it harder to recruit people in the future, and then the whole thing's gonna fall apart, and it's all gonna be my fault. You can kind of get yourself in. But like that feeling never goes away. So if you take on responsibility, so doing that, whether it's starting an organization or taking on as much responsibility as you can, and sort of having that feeling of the weight on your shoulders, I think is a good way to get practice. And like in reality, it's never that bad. And college is like a pretty safe place to have like okay, if you're a bad social chair, it's like not that big a deal, right? And everybody, you kind of have to get some of the notches on your belt to like actually learn how to manage people. And actually in some ways in college, it's even harder than in real life because you got a bunch of unpaid volunteers, right? You're not signing their paychecks. So like trying to get my fraternity to like do stuff or like show up to a cleanup or like come to a rush meeting was in some ways a lot harder than when you are the boss.
Another question from the audience?
I think we have a question here actually in the audience now.
So the question was, different scaling company, what's the difference between 10, 100,000? So 10, when the company's 10 people, it sort of feels like a sort of a very long software engineering project like the ones I had in college. So we had our software engineering lab. We put a bunch of dudes and a bunch of desks in a room and like never left, and we're just coding all the time. And that was our experience when the company was like a 10-person company. We had this office, it was like a mess. We'd come in at like 1 in the afternoon and stay till like the middle, stay till 2, 3, 4 in the morning. I don't even remember, and just huddle everybody together. And so you're all like peers and you're like friends, and sort of there's a lot less of in sort of like the prototypical Silicon Valley kind of startup. It's a bunch of engineers coding, and that's all you do. There's really no line between work and play, especially if people are just out of college. And it's fun. It's kind of an extension of the college experience. And then that was our experience. And it's kind of stuff you can see on the social network or whatever. It's actually pretty accurate. And then a 100-person company, it's like a big family. But you have some structure. So you have, you have formal management and like people are people's bosses, and you started adding some process like that. And then at 1,000, it's like this kind of thing. And then my experience is you have like a core group of like maybe 7 to 10 people that you work, or maybe 10, 15 people you work really, really closely with. Then maybe another group of like 50 that you know pretty well. And then there's like, you just can't possibly know everybody's name after that, which is kind of a weird experience. But, and so the hard part of that is and I think the way you deal with that, and like, is so you have to have different skills. Like the challenge, the things that are hard are very different at each stage. But the way you approach it is kind of the same. You try to, for me, it was like I read a lot of books. I would bother a lot of other entrepreneurs for advice. I would sort of, I would read the histories of like these other companies or try to figure out what they did and how, the cultures they built. And you're sort of going from just like coding every day to designing the system of like code and algorithms to this system of people. And there's some things that are similar and there's some things that are like totally different, and you just got to learn how to do that. But I think the approach, what you need to do as a founder is like keep pushing yourself to like figure out, okay, well, what am I going to need to know, and how long is it going to take to learn? And so like, what am I going to need to know, like 5 years from now, 3 years from now, a year from now, 6 months? Who can tell me what books or whatever? And this is the way I did it. And I think that, when the company's 10, 100,000, a million people, I think that it would be the same kind of challenge.
I think it was interesting in there, you talked about a group of peers. And one of the articles I was reading about you and the company recently, the person referred to the company feeling like it is a group of peers. So how, when you get to 1,000 people, do you get people to still kind of have that feeling within the organization?
Well, I think so. Every company culture is different, and before you study this stuff, it's kind of hard to even really understand. It was, anyway, for me to like what culture is, or like what management is, or what leadership is. Like, these things are all so abstract. But we try to. In Silicon Valley, there's like this huge war for talent, right? So there's a cage fight for every engineer, and so it's like, if you're an engineer, congratulations, you're gonna have a lot of people trying to throw a lot of money at you if you're in the Bay Area. So we know. My take is that people basically want the same things from their work, right? They want to do work that's important, right? They want to come into the office and have it mean something, have what they're doing actually mean something. They want to be surrounded by people that inspire them and that they can learn from and that push them. They want challenges, especially engineers want technical challenges that are hard and interesting. And then you want to be rewarded financially, or there's a bunch of other stuff that you want to work in a comfortable place. There's a list of other stuff. And so, we've culturally decided to, give people a lot of autonomy. Like, we don't, I'm usually not like tapping some engineer's shoulder and being like, you missed a semicolon, or telling our designers to move stuff over 6 pixels, because if I have to do that, then I probably hired the wrong person. And so, there's a lot that we do culturally to sort of design that system of people. But a lot of it is not having a lot of hierarchy, not having a lot of focus on status, really trying to keep people focused on a mission. And I think a lot of it is how my co-founder and I treat people, and sort of trying to model that behavior of trying to care about people, trying to care about the company, try to set a good example.
So, Drew, I'm sure there's probably a lot of questions in the audience, and
Yeah.
we want to make sure those questions get asked. Also, earlier when you spoke about, chasing your tennis ball, if you look behind your seat, we have a bunch of tennis balls there, and
We got tennis balls.
because you signed them. So we're going to be, I don't know about throwing them out, but passing them out to people with questions. So definitely put your hands up, and we'll
I guess
bring
the
a
question
mic
is
over.
is risk management around here or not?
Well, it's actually kind of tricky
Well,
because you can hit the
I
balloons.
was going to say, you should use these to select the people who get to ask questions.
All right.
That's
Because that was not what I
Oh.
wanted. See, there's a
Wait,
it. I went
here,
into
I'm gonna go
computers.
Oh,
We'll
that person,
This
the dean.
this is going to end in
interview-
tears, but here we go.
start over here. So make sure you
we
get
can't
this
get
guy.
questions. They're the ball.
Let's take a question.
Okay. So I guess my question, I'm over here, sorry.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most,
Where is he there?
I guess, technically interesting or difficult challenge from the engineering side that you solved at Dropbox?
We have a lot of them, so a lot of technical challenges. So, I mean, fundamentally, we have a system that hundreds of millions of people are using where they save 1 billion files a day. They're, putting and the total information in the system is many hundreds of billions of gigabytes. It's one of the largest stores of people's most important information on Earth. And by the way, every time someone saves a file or does anything, we can't have a bad day. Nothing can go wrong. So it's like air traffic control, where millions of things are happening every second, you can't have any problems. And so that's hard to do from a technical perspective. And of course things go wrong. It's not possible to design a system that doesn't have failures. But I find that super interesting. How do we build kind of the biggest, again, when we think about what's in there, it's okay, if all these photos that people have, is this one of the biggest biggest collections of human memories ever assembled. When we're making something that makes life a little bit easier, or make it a little faster to sign into your Dropbox, or make it a little faster for a file to make its way from one point to another, if we save you 5 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, times 300 million people, which is the number of people using Dropbox, it's lifetimes of pain that we eliminate every day just by like doing our thing. And so engineers find those kinds of things, and that's just what we've already done, and then, you know, obviously what we want to do is like 10 or 100 times that. So that presents a lot of really exciting challenges for engineers. Steve, you want to throw these tennis balls out so I don't kill anyone? So if anyone dies, it's your fault. There you
Ooh.
go. There we go.
The escape.
All right, next question.
You can pitch one back here. Right over here.
All right, I'm glad everyone has problems with this task.
Hi, my question is, what are some effective ways to get people to use your product? Like for an app, like if you have an app idea, what are some ways to get people to use it?
That is a good question. That is called marketing. No, it is a very good question. So, you know, in its essence, marketing is basically how do you attract people to your service or your product, right? So, you know, the first things I did were, just the way I learned about it was I just searched like for marketing on Amazon and like bought a bunch of books on marketing. And then from some of that stuff, you know, look, there's all kinds of tactical things you can do to, you know, anything from buy AdWords to like hand out flyers at the mall to like, that's all marketing. But some of the things we did early, one example is a video demo that I made. And I actually put it, I made like a 3-minute demo of Dropbox, and you can Google it, it's out there. And I put it on, and I crafted it in a certain way, and I put it on actually Reddit and Dig. Kind of like an early, sort of a video intended to go viral. I picked like a very link bait kind of headline. It said Google Drive killer coming from MIT startup. Google Drive didn't actually exist yet. And then I put all these Easter eggs in there, like, you know, pictures of, if you're just watching the video and not paying attention, it's just kind of a straightforward me narrating over a screen of like, here's how Dropbox works. When you put files in, they save everywhere, blah, blah, blah. But like when you see what I'm actually doing, there's like XKCD comics and like that stuff that was popular on Reddit in those days, like, you know, the HD DVD decryption key. Like this was when Tom Cruise was jumping on this whole Scientology thing, was jumping on the sofa, and you know, so all these Easter eggs in there, and people were like, "What the hell is this?" You know, and they're like, "Oh, these guys like actually come from this community, and they're just like kind of screwing around with us. They're trolling us a little bit." And so people love that, and it sent hundreds of thousands of visitors to the site in a day. You know, we thought we were taking bets for how many people would sign up to try it because it wasn't available. Dropbox wasn't available yet, and we thought maybe at best our list would get to maybe 15,000 people. It got to 75,000 people, and really that's just whether viral marketing or different things. Like a lot of those ideas I read in a book that is probably like 10 years old or more, called Guerrilla Marketing. So it's like, how do you do marketing when you have no money? Which I thought was like a pretty appealing thing.
I think there's one over here.
And one more thing on that. So I actually I did a slide presentation of what we did. So I think it's like 0 to 1 million is what the presentation is called, which is some of the other stories of how we got our first million users.
Yeah, I actually have like 2 questions. The first is when you are facing like the competitions from Google, for example, they provide like 15 gigs of like free space at the initial stage. So what's the best strategy they think you provided like to counter these competitions, and either good or bad? And then the second question is, will you ever like think about using the like users' data to like create some new business models for your business?
So I'll answer the second one. I'll answer the second one first. That is a very so the short answer. The short version is no. People do not. I don't think any of us would be comfortable with the idea that we're like going to mine your stuff, you know, to put a bunch of banner ads against it or something, right? We have like 5 cultural principles in the company. Be worthy of trust is number 1. Because I'm like, you know, we're building the home for people's most important stuff, and like we cannot. That is a very sacred kind of contract that we have with people. So we should be taking care of our users in every way we can. So, you know, now there might be variants of that, like, okay, we see that you are using this app, this document scanning app, maybe you'd like to see this, maybe you'd like to use this big file sending app. I mean, I think there's stuff that maybe conceivably would work, but we're very, very, very careful. So that's the second question. The first question was about competition. You know, our friends at, you know, the good news is we're in the situation we always dreamed of, which is we are competing against the biggest and best companies in the world. You know, I think the way you, so how do you compete with you know, a company like a Google that, you know, can give everything away for free and, you know, has a bajillion engineers and a bajillion dollars. And the answer is you can do it, right? They've, you know, every company and Google had to do this against Microsoft, right? Microsoft was this big, Google was this big. You know, Google tried to come after, but it doesn't always, you know, every company that becomes big grew up in the shadow of someone who's like trying to step on their head, right? And, you know, but it doesn't always, the giant doesn't always win, right? So, you know, you look at Facebook, and Google like had this all-out assault on Facebook in 2009, and like nothing happened. And a lot of what it is because, well, for the way we approach it is like, first of all, we always want to solve the problem in the best way. We want to have the best product, and it starts there. Like that's the foundation. If you can't do that, then like trickery on top of that kind of doesn't matter. But what we found is that people, so they love, when you ask people why they stick with Dropbox, you know, they say that they love that it's easy, that it just works. Like they never have a problem with it. I mean, people have problems with any service, but it's pretty rare with Dropbox. You know, we take care of our users. You're free to use any platform, so you're not like stuck on any one place. And our incentives are aligned, right? So you don't have to worry about us like advertising or like doing bad things or like making it so it only works in this platform. And so I think those structural things are pretty powerful, kind of that being Switzerland, being neutral, being focused. And then a lot of it is because people have these sharing connections, right? If you're using Dropbox and you've maybe started out just using it by yourself, but then you bring it into work, and then you're using it for these projects, and then your contractor is remodeling your house is using it with you, and your accountant, and you're sharing pictures with your college friends and your high school friends, and and you put Dropbox on your iPad and your computer, and it's like a pain in the ass to switch, right? So, but I think all those things are true, but it still goes, for me, it goes back to being the best at what we do and building the best product.
Okay. I want to make sure we work around the room a little bit.
Yeah, I'll try to be
back
quicker.
here.
Here you go. Well,
Do you have any plans on making Dropbox HIPAA compliant?
Short answer is yes, but we don't have a timeline.
Okay.
I mean, we're working on it, but we're not exactly sure when. HIPAA compliance is like a regulation for healthcare, so that we can get, hospitals or other folks using Dropbox.
Thank you.
I just had a question. You got to where you were right now, obviously through a lot of different, life stories and hard work and stuff. But did you ever come across, like, what was your worst enemy? Maybe it was a boss, a competitor, an employee, maybe yourself. Like, what maybe like stopped you, and what made you want to overcome it?
What made me want to what?
What's your worst enemy, like, in your life story?
My worst enemy?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's not so much any one thing as like just repeatedly getting punched in the face thousands of times. Right? It's just sort of a never-ending kind of continuous cycle of like, okay, competitor did this. Oh, Google had another 90% off sale. Great, okay. This person's unhappy. Like this thing that I don't know. There's a lot. Like people don't spontaneously become happy, right? And if you have 1,000 people, they become upset and angry, and they misunderstand things, and stuff gets all jacked up. And when you have 1,000 people, it's like multiply that by probably more than 1,000, a lot more than 1,000. And so there's just always like stuff going on. And yeah, so sometimes but that's to be expected. I think the hard things, are like when, you feel like, it's just a scary feeling to like, be like, when I started the company, I was like, oh my God, the idea of having like 10 people, let alone like 100 or 1,000, that's just like, I'm so not qualified to do that. Like, or these investors just handed me a check for $1 million does anybody realize what a ridiculous idea that the biggest thing I managed was like the rush budget of like 10 grand. Do they know that I'm like 24 and have never done this before? And yes, fortunately, there's like, in Silicon Valley, this happens every day. But no, it's tough. I mean, I think, and there's not, in your company, especially if you're the CEO, there's not a lot of people. You can't really have a bad day and like complain. Like, you always be like, no, everything's good. It's not entirely true, but like, so they're sort of behind the scenes. It's a lot of work and a lot of just kind of plowing through challenge after challenge after challenge.
Okay, we have a few more minutes.
Thank you. For being a CEO, how did you learn to manage all the different type of personalities within the company to beat the competition for a successful goal?
Well, people have written a lot of books about that that question. I think part of it is just experience, part of it is reading, part of it is sort of talking to people that have given me advice. The key advice that if you're actually at the point where you're starting a company, like the most important thing that I've learned, or actually I asked one of my early investors and mentors, like, what are your top 3 pieces of advice? And he's like, that's funny, I asked my mentor that. And he's like, what he said, or maybe I asked him like top 10. And he's like, well, you know what? And what my mentor said was, hire the best people, hire the best people, hire the best people. I'm like, okay, I get it. But that really, the way you deal with that never-ending stream of things, that my co-founder and I call them shit sandwiches. There's always a new shit sandwich every week. The way you deal with that is by having awesome people around you and sort of divide and conquer on the problem, so that you have a manageable amount of stuff. And if you have great people, then they can take care of a lot of those problems.
Okay, so I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions, and this guy had his hand raised for a while.
Hi, I have 2 questions.
Okay.
So
I'll try
the
to be
first
quick.
one is that, be an entrepreneur. What's the most important thing to learn in college?
Just take on responsibility. And if you're interested in startups in particular, then just go work at a startup. See, that's the fastest way to learn about how they work and how to build one and so on.
Okay, so start a business like a game company. As a college student, what should I learn a lot of computer science, or because what do I do?
The answer is yes.
So my question is that while you programming more, or you just when you evaluating the product more when running a business?
I mean, you have to do all of it, right? For making a game, you got the coding is just one piece of it, but you have to make the art, you have to design the game, it has to be fun. But then you have the problems of any other business. You have to find people to actually play it. You have to have, if you want to make money, there has to be some business model, and so on. So I think it's probably the same as any other business.
So because I heard computer science, you have to learn even understand the language or know how to develop the system. Because you should probably learn a lot of things, you probably won't use them a lot. And here in your Penn State, in the IST college, they have the course which is like a simplified addition of the computer science. Like you can learn the thing basically according to your own interest. Like what you want to learn how to.
So I think it depends on the person, but I mean, if you want to start a tech company, it really helps to be a good engineer, because and the reason it helps to be a good engineer is not just for its own sake, but although that is also helpful because you're going to be doing a lot of the coding initially. But good engineers hang out with good engineers, right? So that the better you are, the easier it is for you to recruit people who are really good. And people say like, oh, hire people that are smarter than you, and that's a little oversimple. No one wants to work for someone dumber than them, right? So what you want is hire people who are smarter at better at a thing than you, and then collectively you're awesome at all the things you need to do.
So
That's it. Let's go to another question.
Yeah, last one. Oh,
Thanks. My question will be, I think it's kind of related to the Dropbox. I'm actually kind of at the counter side of it. I'm actually learning business, and I'm starting to learn code right now. So the problem I face on day one will be that if you want to develop a product like Dropbox, when you start it, like few users, like 5 or 10, you don't need to worry about the traffic to the server.
Huh.
Well, right now it's like millions of users. You need to worry about how to make the files faster delivered to the users. So which one you focus on first? Like the like suppose that the 10 bucks, you focus on getting the job done first, like deliver the service first, or you deliver it fast and safe?
Yeah.
Which
so,
one?
So it depends on the business.
Mhm.
You know, to get to like win in the long run, you have to survive the short run, right? So, but it's okay if you have a small audience and like design for that problem at first. I mean, where okay, you don't need to design your game to have 1 billion users if you don't have 10, right? So you can take some shortcuts then. And then one thing that's a little bit different about Dropbox, which is easier for most other companies, is that like we're making something that is kind of mission critical, right? You want to launch fast and iterate quickly and break stuff and move fast, but not if you're making like pacemakers or like airplanes, right? Like move fast and break stuff does not work for airplanes, right? So, but for 99 or for the vast majority of problems, that approach is better and faster.
So maybe I'll throw in one last question. To the extent that you can or are willing, I guess, what do you think is the next big thing or the next wave kind of coming along in your piece of the industry?
That's for all you guys to figure out. Come on. No, it's a super exciting time for the startup world and technology in general. And so I think what a lot of us are excited about is just how technology is, or like all these offline industries are becoming like slowly getting taken over by the software and technology industry, right? So people get that, okay, yeah, I don't have to go to a library anymore because I can Google something. Or I don't have to go to the mall anymore because I can get it off of Amazon. But now it's like, if I need a place to like stay or I need a ride, like that's a software. Those are software businesses that have no inventory. And agriculture, like everything's going to get turned upside down by software. And then I think the other thing is just the rise of like machine learning and AI, or sort of weak forms of AI, which is going to have really good implications, really bad implications. Not like robots take over the world implications, but although people are worried about that someday. But like all these problems of computer vision or like vision and perception in general are going to like give rise to these like super like really awesome kind of increases in quality of life.
No, thank you. And I think with that, I will thank you for taking the time to come and visit us at Penn State and spend the afternoon with us. So please join me in thanking Drew. And I've learned that Penn State has everything, including wrapping paper.
All right.
So I have a gift for you to thank you for your time. Oh.
All right, thanks, guys.
Yep, safe. Okay. Well, thank you.